Welcome to the first meeting of the Management Committee in the new municipal year. The first item of business is election of chairman. Are there any nominations? Jim, Andrew?
Yes, Chair. Yes, Neil, I would like to nominate Jim Fruin.
Is that seconded? Are there any other nominations? Yes.
I'd like to ask at this, if you look at the election of chairman in the constituent constitution, it talks about a vote, so I'd like to have a recorded vote on this, please, including fors, against and abstentions, and for the same for the vice chair as well.
Okay, if there are no other nominations, I will then read out the recorded vote list. David Cornish? Oh, so it's for, against or abstain, for.
And for the
Andy Croy? Peter Dennis? Jim Fruin?
for.
Graham Howe?
For.
Norman Jorgensen?
For.
Adrian Mather?
For.
Andrew Mickleborough?
For.
Stuart Munro?
For.
Alison Swaddle?
For.
And Bill Soane.
For.
Okay, that's unanimous. So if you'd like to take the chair, Councillor Fruin?
And the next item is nominations for vice chair. Have we got any nominations? Andy? Is there a seconder for that? Any other nominations? No. So again, can we have a recorded vote on that, please?
Okay, I'll read it out. David Cornish? Andy Croy? Peter Dennis? Jim Fruin?
For.
Graham Howe?
For.
Norman Jorgensen?
For.
Adrian Mather?
For.
Andrew Mickleborough?
For.
Stuart Munro?
For.
Alison Swaddle?
For.
Jim and Bill Soane?
For.
That's unanimous again, Chairman.
So the next item is apologies.
We have apologies from Gregor Murray and Bill Soane is here as a substitute.
Thank you, Bill. Minutes from the previous meeting. Are there any comments on the minutes from the previous meeting? Andrew?
Can I raise a couple of matters of arising out of those minutes at this point?
Mm-hmm.
Is that okay? Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
On page 6, a number of items were referred back to the service for a detailed response. Who receives these responses, and can they be made available to all overview and scrutiny management members in advance of the following meetings, so that we're aware of what has happened since the previous meeting with those responses? Secondly, on page 8, I wonder if we might be able to, if someone is able to give an update on resolution 3, the member training sessions on the business change service. And on page 15, an update on resolution 3, quote, details of actions taken in response to the approved council motions to be set out on the WBC website. Now, I appreciate it may not be possible to get answers to all those questions now, okay, but I thought it was useful to raise them. Thank you.
In relation to the first one, yes, we can circulate those actions to all members of overview and scrutiny. In relation to the second one, I believe that discussions are ongoing in relation to member training. I think Sally is online and might want to comment.
Yes, thank you for that, Neil. So on the business change one, if I can just start off on that one first. So we're working with the governance team about how we can support members in relation to the wider kind of training offer that's on kind of the plans for the future, and part of that will incorporate looking at business change and how we can build change into that piece. On the website question, so we're in the process of looking at replacing our corporate website and looking actively seeking a partner at the moment to make sure that we've got a website improvement programme in place that will start during this financial year.
Thank you.
And the rest we'll try to get an answer for the next meeting in July. Long enough for you?
Yes.
Yeah. So the next item, any declarations of interest? Declarations of interest? Any public questions? No public questions. Any member questions?
None received, Chairman.
None received. Okay. So just before we go on to the next item, which is the Q4 performance review, I'd just like to say a thank you to everyone for voting me in as chairman of this. And just to clarify some of the points of what we should be trying to achieve with scrutiny. There was some very good training last week. I know a few of you here attended it, which really positioned it quite well. It's about holding the executive to account, policy development and review, performance monitoring and external scrutiny. That's the 4 points that we should be looking at. And it's how we do that, which I think is important. Constructive critical friend. Currently, and I've spoken to an officer tonight, coming to scrutiny has been seen almost like an audit. And that is something that we shouldn't be doing. We should be working with officers and the executive as a group to try to achieve the top 4 points. Driving improvement in services. I'd like to understand, and I make this offer to all members of this committee and to all members, what improvements we should be able to demonstrate at the end of the next year, this municipal year. What improvements do we want and how are we going to get there? So let's have something in the report at the end of this municipal year which says these are the successes we've had. And lastly, to amplify the voice of the public, it's about all of the members trying to get the voice of the residents to such a level that we can actually improve and take a step forward. I've had some conversations this week with a number of people and everybody seems keen to improve. So let's just try to do that if we can. If we go on to the Q4 performance review, we'll present it. Over to you, Graham.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for those words of introduction. I completely agree. OK, so by way of opening up this report, I just want to say a few words. Firstly, you would normally expect to see executive members present for the performance monitoring, which is obviously in line, consistent with the holding executive to account. And we need to try to work on how we do that in an efficient way, because, of course, these PIs cover all executive members and you may not have questions for particular areas. So we probably, in an ideal world, if we knew your particular lines of inquiry, concern, exploration, then we could make sure we have the right personnel present, in particular the right executive member. On this occasion, we don't think it's particularly fair to expect the executive member to front what is last year's performance report, because of course we have a new executive. But what we do have tonight is in person, you have Steve, who will cover the areas of P&G, Sally, who will cover areas of Chief Executive, myself, who will cover resources and assets, and we will, of course, try to pitch in if there's any questions beyond our remits. It's probably worth also stating the fact in terms of governance, there are scrutiny committees that look at PIs as well. So there'll be children's services will look at children's PIs, health and wellbeing board, and there's a wellbeing scrutiny, I believe, but the adult social care indicators get scrutinised elsewhere. So I suppose it's important that we have just one place of recognised scrutiny as opposed to multiple iterations of that. So I think that probably means that the main focus for this meeting should be all those that aren't children's services and adult social care. And like I say, myself, Steve and Sally will do our best to cover those off. But of course, if you're going to, even with us present, if you want to go deep into particular PIs, then there's only so much we're going to know from our particular positions. So like I say, I think the more we can know your particular interest, areas of interest, the more we can make this a useful meeting for yourselves in the spirit of Jim's opening comments. Okay, so moving on to the report. The report is both the Q4 and the full year effect. And overall, I would say it was generally positive with 67% greens in the backdrop of an extremely challenging year, and ways of articulating that challenge, which arose through all sorts: COVID, refugees, not just Ukrainian, but other, and the inflationary pressures that have an impact on our community. And all of that has, just to give you some context of both increase in demand and complexity of the calls across the council on their service delivery. So just to run through some sound bites, adult social care had a 142% increase in discharges from hospital over a 3-year period. In homelessness, the approaches in Q4 was a staggering 256 alone, and homelessness has gone up 30%. Obviously, Steve can speak in more detail about that. In children's services, from December 21 to March 22, we've had a 32% increase in children in care, and I'm also aware that in the SEND area that increases by almost 25% as well. So big pressures there. Just an example of also the additional work that we've had to undertake in response to COVID, and indeed the impact of inflation, is the business rates and council tax team in that area. They've distributed £70 million worth of support over a 2-year period, and some of that has been pretty complex as well. And currently, of course, dealing with the £150 contribution to energy, and that's taken a lot of time. So some of these might sound quite simple to administer, and some of the pressures you might think are easing, but that's certainly not the case. So the last year was achieved. The achievements were made in the backdrop of some very severe pressures over and above business as usual. Other things that are identified as achievements that maybe are linked to the PIs, but also beyond, is the MJ awards. We've got 2 that have made the shortlist for the Municipal Journal's final. I think they're probably about 6. in a shortlisted final, and we'll see shortly whether we win those or not. But the fact that we're on those lists for both climate emergency and adult social care is obviously a testament to the achievements that have gone in those areas. The peer review reported back, and that was generally positive, but of course there are things we need to improve upon. One of those being already referenced member training and how Scrutiny operates, amongst other things. And we've started our UNICEF Child Friendly Communities programme, which is in itself an achievement to get onto that list and then be supported in terms of taking it forward. We've obviously shown we have the right current skills and the current intent to take forward a very extensive programme. So I think I'll stop there and then hand it over to you to take forward your questions, lines of inquiry.
Thank you very much, Graham, for your introduction and overview to this report, and also thanks to all of the officers who contribute to these reports. It's always much appreciated. I take on board your comments about adult social services, adult social care, and also children's services, but I do want to raise a question and ask members whether they would like to discuss a recommendation with regards to the KPIs for adult social care. The KPIs relating to adult social care, a cursory reading of the report with 4 out of the 7 red KPIs referring to adult social care might suggest some reasons for concern. However, it's stated that these are stretch KPIs. And of course, we applaud this. But I do wonder whether we should consider whether some of these KPIs might be reviewed and perhaps instead use performance of statistical neighbours, or on page 19, there's a reference to the Southeast Benchmarking Club, because adult social care are performing very well against these, but the red reports are hiding this. Adult social care would, I'm sure, continue to strive for even higher levels of performance, and perhaps using other legitimate benchmarks would give an even more informative picture, of the service's performance. So the recommendation that I would like to suggest is that the director and executive member for adult social care review all existing KPIs to ensure that they enable reliable comparisons with other local authorities, whilst not sacrificing the desire for continuous stretch.
Any comments on that from anyone? Adrian?
Yeah, I've spent 20 years plus in this business, performance management. The thing that always concerns me the most is wall-to-wall green rated reports. I've had a number of discussions with Matt Pope about his KPIs, and I think it's very good what he's trying to do. I think it's a fair question to review that, to review against comparatives, but I understand that he wants to see a stretch. One of the missions we have is to improve services. Let me be clear on this. You cannot improve a service if you're wall-to-wall green, because you've already achieved everything. I expect to see the other areas to be less green, because in my view, the other areas to drive improvements in services need to think about stretching themselves a bit more. So I would argue that Andrew is right. That there should be a review, but I would suggest not just of adult social care, but of all the different departments.
So Andrew has made a proposal. Are you suggesting an amendment to that proposal?
I'm not sure quite what the wording is, but I wouldn't want to necessarily force adult social care in a specific direction. I agree with the thrust that there should be review.
Sorry, Alison.
So I would like to hear from Graham before we move to the motion. Would that be okay?
Sorry, is that okay, Jim? Jim,
Go for
yeah.
it.
Okay, my thoughts are, I would certainly, if I was going to ask adult social care to review the KPIs, I would think it would be good to locate that question proposal with the committee that scrutinises. I agree, it's the lead member and executive, the executive member and the director, Matt Pope, would need to, their views are important as well. Then so first of all, it's locating the question in the right place, and I think it should, in terms of governance, it should be maybe a proposal to, if you want to do it, to the committee that reviews the adult social care PIs to pick up with the lead member and director. The other issue is two issues. There's that, and then the other one is about stretch targets versus not stretch targets, or however you want to describe them. And I think it's, I don't think there's a one right answer, because so I think it's about the context of the PIs. I understand the intention to improve, but we can easily set targets so that everything comes up red. Just a simple example, if I put council tax collection, we achieved 99.5%, the best in the country, I'm sure, by a long way, and the highest we've achieved. If I made that 99.6, I can, with great confidence, tell you it's going to be red, no matter what we do. And of course, it might drive the wrong type of performance, an overzealous focus on collection as opposed to compassion and empathy, which the community needs right now. So I think we need to be careful what the question is, what the ask is, and maybe it's more of a broader question about the lead member and the director in reviewing KPIs to see what would lend itself to a greater stretch and what wouldn't, based on the priorities of the council, because I think some could drive the wrong types of behaviours, and also we know we would just be creating a red at year end. We could tell you now. Another example, of course, is revenue monitoring. So what do we, and capital monitoring. So what would a stretch target be? To underspend by more, and then if underspending's the name of the game, then it's not about delivery. So they're just examples of a one-size-all approach may not give the desired impact.
Graham?
Yeah, I mean, in general, I would agree with continuous revision between the lead members and lead officers. The only thing that I would say in Andrew's proposal, as I understand it, to compare it with our neighbours, when our neighbours are made up of different geographies and demographics and so forth, might not necessarily be terribly helpful and might only be a guidance. I think you'd agree with that.
Steve?
Thank you, Chair. Just to come back on a couple of points, just to give members assurance, Matt does a very robust job within adult social care in respect of performance indicators, probably the most robust in the council. Sorry. The job that Matt does in adult social care is probably the most robust, I'd probably say corporately, in relation to PIs, probably second to none, actually. He will have benchmarking information. It's not in the report. He'll have them as local performance indicators. And I know he does benchmark himself. And to pick up Graham's point, when local authorities, it's a good point you raised in relation to, apples and pears, what you do when you analyse. There are family group authorities that are very similar. So it's not necessarily our geographical nearest neighbour, it's the one that's most relevant to us. So you get the best possible comparison you can. And I know that Matt does that as well. So I think maybe we can ask Matt or whatever to maybe share all of the data and information he's got in relation to the way that he monitors his service on a daily basis. I would add, it's a daily based monitoring going on in there. It's very dynamic in the way it works. Thank you.
Can I just make a couple of comments as well, Graham, if I can? Firstly, over the last 12 months, these KPIs have improved time after time after time. They're much clearer to understand now. But I still think there's an opportunity for us now to say, and I use the wider us, it's not just this committee, I think it's the executive, it's the officers, it's the directors, it's every member. Are these the right measures that will enable us to ensure we have good scrutiny and good improvement? Do these measures help us improve? I think some of them are, as Adrian said, are green all the way through. Some of the stretch targets are brilliant, and I can understand where they come from. And I totally agree that some measures shouldn't be stretched because they create the wrong behaviours. So I will make an offer that if anybody has suggestions of KPIs, then that's anybody that will help us scrutinise this council appropriately and drive improvements, then let us know and we'll try to get that discussed in the next meeting if we possibly can. It shouldn't just be a red focus. We need to proactively try to seek areas that we want to improve and see if we can actually get them improved very quickly. In the reports, there are top opportunities highlighted by each of the directorships, which is great. How do we measure those opportunities to see whether we realise them or not? Because having 3 opportunities, let's see what the action plans are behind them. I totally agree with what Graham said. I think this committee should be focusing on the management KPIs. We should trust our other committees that deal with adult social care and children's services to get on and do that. And if they have any issues, they can bring it back to this management committee afterwards for support. I think there's an element of preparation needed before we have these meetings. So KPIs, not just on a quarterly basis, but I think we should have input before each of the overview and scrutiny management meeting to turn around and say, these are the things that have gone really well. These are the improvements that we're looking for. And these are the things that we need help with so that we can actually challenge. So I think there's a need to take this KPI report to the next stage and try to make it a lot more useful if we can. Andrew?
Yeah, in light of the wide-ranging discussion on this issue, I would like to withdraw my recommendation as it stood, but the discussion will be minuted, okay, and will be considered by the Director of Adult Social Care and the executive member, and I am satisfied that they will deal with that these concerns appropriately. But I'm really pleased that we have aired this issue. So thank you for that.
I agree with Graham. I think Graham made a very insightful comment that we need to think about continuous improvement. Continuous improvement from my side, and I agree with you, Jim, means we need to look at those things that are coming along, the new things, and they cannot possibly be green. Let's be clear. If something is an opportunity, if something is a challenge, if something is new on the road, it can't possibly be green because we haven't executed the action plan yet. So we should be seeing, in my personal view, less wall-to-wall green and a mixture, a broad range of green, amber and red. And this shows, or should show in my perspective, that the green things we've successfully executed, fantastic. The amber things we're partially executed, but the challenges and new things coming along the road, we haven't necessarily defined the action plan. We haven't delivered it. So it must be red.
Graham, have you got any response to that?
Right. First of all, I think I think where you were, I thought, Sandy, you were going there, Jim, to begin with, was it linked to your opening comment about the purpose of scrutiny is how we make a difference as a scrutiny, how we generate improvement. So I do think that question around what are those really important areas to us that we need to attend to, and how do we go about setting performance metrics and reporting back to this committee. So I think that will warrant at least a discussion with yourself, Jim, as chairman, and maybe others at your discretion, to try to understand how we can structure our reports and create the focus to enable your desired intention. So I think there's one that, and we can't, do it create by committee right here now, but I think we need a further conversation. I would, in terms of, and so yes, continuous improvement. In terms of the issue about new things, well, they're not. I suppose obviously when you're formulating, they just land on you. They're red, but of course you'll set up, as governance, you'll set up project plans, timeframes, milestones, and just because they new doesn't mean they're red, unless in terms of standard project management, unless there's a reason to think you're not on track with your initial set out desired outcomes, including your key milestone timelines and benefit deliverables. So it's not an easy one to respond to, other than we understand the desire for setting targets higher where appropriate to drive that continuous improvement, and maybe we need to think about how we structure the pack so that the focus is on those things you are particularly interested in helping drive improvement, as well as seeing the full range across the council, some of which may just be quite satisfying to know that the standard is, I'll use council tax again, you probably would think 99 point something percent being the best in the country is decent enough, but you want assurances that that's green all through the year, or close to green throughout the year. So some of the BAU ones you might feel quite reassured, but they're not your areas of priority. So maybe it's about how we order and present.
I think also, Graham, where I was coming from originally was it's an opportunity for officers and directors to give us an indication of the areas that they are particularly keen to inform us of, because it should be a two-way thing. It's not just us asking for information. It should be what information you want to share with us as well. And I'm desperately keen to make sure that we don't overburden people with KPIs, but we try to make the best use of the indications we've got. And for us all to remember that some of these percentages we talk about are actually, when it comes down to numbers, are individuals' lives. So a 25% increase in something may actually be 10 people. It's what can we do to help those 10 people, or it may be a lot more than that. Adrian again.
Again, I want to agree with you there, Jim. We shouldn't be expanding KPIs. There was a brilliant interview of Jeremy Hunt where he was asked if he regretted anything, and he said, yes, we had too many KPIs, which was a really, I thought, insightful comment. Choosing KPIs should be selective, targeted, really focused. Millions and millions of BAU KPIs all reporting green is not informing anybody of anything, in my view.
So, Graham, I'll take you up on your offer, and perhaps we can meet between this and the next meeting and see if we can bring something back to the next overview and scrutiny meeting on KPIs.
Okay, Jim, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on the KPI and performance reviews? Someone?
So it's more questions about the KPIs in front of us rather than on the what you've just been talking about. If you finish with that item, yeah, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And so it's just I think it's a comment plus a question to Graham. The KPIs are essentially backward looking, and scrutiny needs to be forward looking. My concern is that, again, we're talking about the presentation of KPIs, and again, as Graham has acknowledged, we won't necessarily have the right people in the room to give us the right information. Certainly won't necessarily have the decision makers. And what my concern is that we're reading too much into the KPI report, if I can use that expression. And actually, the less time we spend looking at the KPI report, the better, and the more time we spend looking at the forward bigger projects coming down the track. That's where we can add value. I'll finish off with a question. I mean, I don't know if any of the formerly executive members here or Graham or any of the other officers can think of any examples where questions raised by looking at a KPI report has actually made a difference, because that's what we've been talking about. And I strongly suspect never, although I'm happy to be proved wrong on that. And if we haven't got a handful of examples straight away, then you've got to think, well, what's the point?
Steve?
We need to focus on other things. That's my point.
Thank you, Chair. Just to come back on that. So the most important part of any KPI report is the narrative. So because the narrative should acknowledge performance, explain why we're there, so we can demonstrate confidence to you that we know what we're talking about, whether it's good or bad performance. But most importantly, the management action plan in relation to what we're going to do to address performance. So that's the forward-looking bit that you measure us by. So we are where we are with performance, but what you're going to do about it is actually the pushback onto officers in relation to have a plan to improve performance. So the narrative is absolutely critical and should put that up. But I do appreciate that it is a backward look by its nature, I suppose, because obviously it's past tense, but maybe we can strengthen in relation to the action plans, in relation to what's going to happen in Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, in relation to, as I say, to give you confidence that we're not just accepting where we are. There is a plan in place to improve what we're doing.
Adrian, on the same subject, and then over to Norman. Yeah.
I think that's really insightful comments. I really appreciate those. We need to be thinking about the future. I agree totally with Andy Croy, and we need to be focusing on the issues that are going to derail us, the management action plans that we need to address those issues. I think this has been a very constructive discussion.
Thank you. Norman?
Okay, thank you. My questions are really about the narrative that goes with 2 or 3 of the items. So the first one's on the local plan update, which is on page 48. The sort of commentary is that the number of affordable dwellings completed in the year was almost at the target, but not quite. And quite a number have been carried forward effectively into the coming year. Do we know how many are sort of carried forward? Do we know the sort of proportion? Any idea?
So I don't know the specific detail in relation to that number. I do know there was a slight drop off in the affordable houses completed, because I think the year previously and the year before that was exceptional. So it actually achieved in relation to our target. So I think when you look at affordable dwellings delivered, I think you have to look at it in the round over a 3-4 year period. Some will be accelerated more in one year than another year, but I can certainly get you the data information. But it's not a huge issue, I don't think, in relation to where we are. What I would say, and linked to housing to this, and picking up one of those key hot topic areas for me, so what sort of keeps me awake at night, is 2 things. One's the term affordable housing, because affordable for who is always something I say. Affordable housing by its definition is 80% of the private market rents, for example. So if you can't afford £1,500 a month to rent, I'm sure you can't afford £1,200 a month or whatever the mass is. So there's certainly that, and whether we should be increasing potentially our affordable housing target in relation to our local plan as a local plan develops going forward. But it's not as straightforward as that either. There are competing priorities. When you talk to a developer, you will, effectively, in simple terms, a developer will say, what is it you want as a local authority? We might require SEND schools, we might require dementia care units, we might require social housing, we might require all sorts of things we want for our infrastructure, our roads, and so on and so on. And that list is not exhaustive, but the pot of money is. So understanding our need, understanding what our priorities are, so we're putting the right infrastructure in the right places, whether it be affordable housing or not, is one of the most critical things that we have to do. Because homelessness presentation has gone up, as Graham said, considerably in the last couple of quarters, and we are seeing unprecedented demand coming into the system, which is going to put budgets under pressure, and our supply to be able to discharge our duties in Borough, which is very, very tricky at the moment. So that is absolutely in place and growth. One of the key hot topics, if you did want to look at and get into in a bit in a greater detail, I think the homelessness presentation and our ability to meet the demand is something of significant importance. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Yeah, it's an important, very important subject, obviously. And the next one really was on the percentage of waste recycled from the curbside, which is on page 52. I mean, it's good to see that the amount is edging up year by year, and it certainly looks like it's up, and it seems to have sustained better this year. Do we've got any information again behind the reasons for that and the sustainability of it, and what we think is going to happen this year? Crystal ball. I know it's very difficult, and you don't want to be hanging yourself out to dry, but you know, we must have looked at why and how sustainable that is.
Thank you. We certainly have active campaigns ongoing all the time, so we're constantly pushing and nudging the importance of why it is important for our communities to recycle. I think we've pushed the green agenda very hard, certainly in my short tenure here. I know climate issues are very important. People are very environmentally aware in this borough, and so it's a credit to the people of Wokingham that they do participate and actively want to participate. Through my experience, behaviours in waste management are primarily driven by economic factors. So I think as things get tighter for some people, you'll see changes in behaviour in what they present from a waste point of view. People may not be so wasteful in what they do. I know, I bought another chest freezer at home myself, you know, and stuff like that. So we don't want to throw things away. But what I would say from a waste point of view, and this is also linked to the economics and the finances, is from a waste hierarchy perspective, what sits at the top of the tree is minimisation. So not creating it, it's not recycling. Recycling is very important, of course it is, but it's reduce, reuse, recycle, the 3 R's as we all know, but recycling is mid-table. It's not the number one thing. And in Wokingham, the total tonnage, whether it's recyclable or not, per household is high. So we generate a lot of waste as a borough. We do present a lot of waste. We recycle a lot, people compost a lot, but we present more waste at the curbside. So the focus for me should be, in relation to the waste strategies, how do we get address the waste at source and get people to change behaviour so they don't create any sort of waste in the first place, or reduce how much waste they actually generate in the first place, because that also affects our cost for waste disposal. The RE3 contract, which is obviously the joint contract with Bracknell Forest and Reading, is recharged on tonnage. So if we generate more waste, then we pay more as a local authority. And if Reading or Bracknell were to reduce their waste, then our slice of the cake will get bigger and our costs would go up. So it's very important, both environmentally and economically, that this is sustained, but we also change our focus onto minimisation. Thank you.
David?
Thank you. Apologies if the detail too far, but just to pick up on that point and the percentage of waste recycled, does that include garden waste or is that just household waste?
So there's two stats here. You've got the total percentage, including recycled and composted, on page 51, which is PG19. You can see that's at 54%. So when you include the compostable material as well, it's a higher percentage, which is a good performance, to be honest. You know, for a local authority that hasn't maybe gone as far as some other authorities in restricting waste at the curbside, which is one of the key things. You know, if you look at local authorities that are at 60 or 70%, it's not magic and rocket science. It's quite clear in relation to what the methodology is to maximise recycling. So for what we do, that's very high performance. So combined, it's over 50%, and the recycling there is in relation to what we call dry recycler, which will be the card, cans, and the plastics.
And Andrew, and then that's the last one on this. Oh, sorry. Come over this side.
Sorry?
Say that again. Sorry, I couldn't hear.
When Norman and I had our hand up earlier and you decided to keep to the first topic and go to Andy, I did have my hand up then.
All right, I'm sorry.
So I've been waiting for my turn.
I just said to Neil here, I assume noticing the hands going up comes with practice because I'm struggling at the moment. It's your turn now.
Okay. Just in the notes on PG 12, it mentions the fly tipping cross-party working group. Could you tell me some more about that, please?
Unfortunately, I can't, Councillor. I'm not actually familiar with it. So I'm sure it is meeting and taking place. But obviously it wouldn't be in the narrative, but I can certainly give you an update of who's sitting on that. Now, bearing in mind this is Q4 performance, so obviously that would have been something in the last quarter of last year. But I can certainly find out what it's doing, what it's talking about, what it's decided, which obviously is the key part of that. But I'll come back to you on that.
As a member, it was set up following a request to all councillors for ideas on reducing fly tipping some 15 months ago now, and it's met monthly ever since. It's under Perry Bath, where it was under Perry Bath up until.
So who does it report back to?
That's a good question.
Wasn't it chaired by Perry?
Yeah. Where it reports back to now, I don't know.
I would imagine the new, what are they called, the senior councillor for the environment now owns it.
I know they're looking to try to refresh the thing. We have waste strategy on the July in 2 weeks' time on the agenda. So if I can park some of those questions, but I will find out where it goes to now. And apologies for not seeing the hand. I need the glasses. Norman.
Right. My final question was about the occupancy rate of the WBC owned regeneration units on page 53. It says that it's 95% occupancy, which is great, but that there were a couple of units outstanding and in sort of legal hands. I just wonder if anything's moved on since this Q4 report that we can hear about. Anything, Graham, that you can report to us?
No, sorry, Norman. Obviously, 95% is a fantastic achievement given the impact on economy of COVID Brexit, etc. But no, I can't give you the answer on the specifics. I'm not aware of any recent final signatures, but I don't know for sure. I just don't recall.
Okay, thank you.
Andrew.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to go back to the matter of recycling again, if I may. And thank you so much, Steve, for making the very important distinction, which I hadn't picked up on, between percentage figures and tonnage figures. Yeah. So my question, comment, recommendation, is there some sort of formal process, okay, for ensuring that recycling targets are fit for purpose? From what you were suggesting, we do need to perhaps, be considering giving more prominence to tonnage as opposed to percentages, both in terms of, the corporate objectives and other matters. Is there a process, a formal process for periodically reviewing and raising? I'm sure we would all want to raise these targets in line with the corporate objectives, in line with changes in behaviours, technology and so forth, that should make higher targets more realistic and achievable in future. And my suggestion is that it was mentioned a moment ago that at the next Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee meeting, I think on the 7th of July, the waste strategy will be presented. I'm just wondering whether there might still be time to try to include some thoughts on those matters in that either report or in the oral introduction to the report.
Thank you. So it's a draft waste strategy that would be coming forward. So there certainly is opportunity to contribute. I mean, just so members are aware, we've done quite an extensive public consultation exercise over the last few months. And we've been supported by RAP, or one of the government bodies in relation to waste management and these sort of things. So lots of people involved. And we've asked the public, quite rightly, about, well, what's the most important thing for you when it comes down to waste management? And they've said looking after the environment. That's been really, really clear. And you'll see that in the report. So we need to build on that, and we need to understand what does it mean in reality. So if you ask someone whether they want to save the planet, of course they'll say yes, I want to save the planet. If you ask someone if they want to save the planet so much that they're going to give up their car, you're probably going to get a different answer from many people at the moment. Okay, so it's about the consequence of the action in relation to how far people are willing to go to contribute to a cause of something. So like I've said here, household tonnage is absolutely critical. It is the indicator. So what you will see in this year is it's going to be very prominent, the percentage of household tonnage, kilograms per household of waste collected at curbside, because that is the critical indicator. There's been a lot of focus on recycling, as I said earlier on, and that's good because people's behaviours have changed massively over the last 10, 15, 20 years in relation to how they treat waste as a resource rather than something they just throw away. But we do have to take it to the next step if we really want to achieve the goals that everyone says they want to do. Yeah, you've got to shrink waste at the curbside. If you're genuinely keen to address climate, genuinely keen to be green as a borough, you've got to shrink the waste stream. And the way you do that is to educate and encourage everyone in relation to what they need to do their part. So going back to the key targets we should set, there is best practice out there. Councils do this very, very well, not just in rural areas, they do it in urban areas as well. And the methodologies they have of how they achieve their top level of performance is very clear. So you have to look at your waste collection arrangements. You have to look at your education strategy in relation to it. To get to a council that recycles 60%, 70% recycling, to see a downward trend in relation to tonnage at the curbside. So it is something that requires some thinking, and that will come forward as part of the thinking of the waste strategy for conversation to see if people do want to go down certain routes in relation to waste or whether they don't. So it's a bit of a long-winded answer, I know, but the key takeaway there is the key focus should be on the tonnage of all wastes, road recyclable and residual waste collected from the curbside.
I've got two more hands up and three more hands up. I'm getting better. I'm starting to spot them. Three more hands up. But if all these questions are on waste, can we keep them short, because we will have opportunity to discuss this at the next meeting, unless it's something, as Andrew just did, which is trying to influence what we're going to do in 2 or 3 weeks' time. So firstly, hand up was Adrian.
Yeah, I'd like to make an observation. This is classic sign of we've got green, 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 and your commentary was it's not good enough. So if you're saying it's not good enough, how can it possibly be all green? The two don't tally for me at all. So that's an observation. The next thing is the ask, and the ask should be forward direction, forward action plans. I know you've mentioned you're going to present the strategy, etc. But I'm supporting Andy's point that we should be thinking about, okay, if we're not satisfied with this, where do we go? That's. But I really appreciate your comments.
Peter?
Really, again, for this forthcoming meeting, is you mentioned tonnage. Is what makes up that tonnage, and how we dealing with the vendors who are supplying the tonnage, forcing our people to throw it away.
There'll be a waste composition analysis in relation to what people are throwing away and what they're recycling. So we've certainly got the evidence there, and you're quite right. Putting pressure on the retailers and to changing their behaviours. You go back, I don't know, 10 years. There wasn't an organic food aisle in a supermarket because there wasn't a demand. Now they've all got one because there's a demand. As behaviours have changed, so retailers will change their behaviours if they know there's a demand. So if the public turn around and say, I don't want to buy packaged foods, actually, I want to buy loose food, fresh food, and this sort of things, then the retailers will change their behaviour from a business perspective. So we do lobbying, absolutely, into local retailers and supermarkets and those sort of places. And of course, the amount of food that's thrown away is criminal as well in relation to some of the things that happen. So we do a lot of work with them, but you're quite right. It's not just about our households. It's about manufacturers. It's about sort of suppliers and retailers, and the whole picture needs to be looked at to make a difference.
Bill?
Yeah, we finished with waste, or can I move on to something else?
Yeah, I'm hoping we will.
Right, okay. It's just a query on page 53, which is the Carnival Pole regeneration. We've got a green and everything is on time until, when you get down to quarter 4, it says Library Centre, the Leisure Centre and Library on track to open in the end of June 22. Unless this has changed dramatically in the last few weeks, I don't believe that the library is going to open at the end of June, because I think we had a delay on furniture.
Graham, do you want to? Graham?
Yes, sure. No, you're right. I don't know if it's that the narrative is wrong there, but the library opening at the same time as the rest of the facility has not been the intention for as long as I've known, and it does so. It was always that the library piece would follow the opening of the hub. So I think and apologies if the description's wrong, but the key program from my perspective was getting the Carnival hub finished on budget to time, and ready to then become operational, recognizing that the library piece would follow when it was able to.
Okay, thank you.
Last one.
This is a new issue, if I may. Yep. Okay. Thank you very much. And I'm picking up on Andy's earlier comment about one of the roles of this committee, important roles, is to look forward at future issues. And Steve also sort of supported this by talking about the importance of us being confident that management action plans are in place, that we're confident that they will be able to address performance going forward. Now, that's the context of this comment. In both adult social care and children's services reports, there are multiple references to the increasing complexity of concerns that are presenting. This seems to be happening very quickly, and I believe it has the potential to inflict many, many harms, if not addressed. This is not the place to be discussing this in any sort of detail at the moment, but what I would like us to consider is asking, or whether we should ask the directors of adult social care and children's services to produce short reports, and I do stress very short reports, on the challenges, potential risks and other resource and any other responses already underway or planned going forward to address this issue of increasing complexity of cases. Because I know certainly in children's services overview and scrutiny, on which I've sat now for 3 years, this has come up again and again. And my suggestion would be, that if such short reports were produced, that they would then be presented, could then be presented to Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny and to HOSC to make any recommendations as they saw fit to the executive.
Is there a seconder for that proposal? Or Graham, do you want to come back on that first?
Yes, I would. It's the last point I'd pick on. I pick up. I think I think it's reasonable for us to ask the Children's Services and Scrutiny to seek that, but I think it's about locating that work and that report with that committee.
You happy with that, Andrew? Yeah. All right. Thanks, Graham.
Again, I like reports, but I always want to see where we're going. So, if the issue is complexity, then we need to have a clear understanding of where that's coming from, but also, what are the action plans to try and address that? So we always need to get to that, where do we go with this? I would be very keen for that, but I would absolutely support Andrew.
Agree. Next item, scrutiny and improvement review. Graham, I think it's you, isn't it?
Yeah, I can say some words by way of introduction, but Neil's obviously the author of the report and will know this territory better than me. But obviously we've already referred to the fact that we know scrutiny can be better, and the key, I think the points you made, Jim, about can we show at the end of the year the difference the work of scrutiny is made, and I think some round the committee would say, well, actually there's been a lot of talking, but what difference has been made? But in making a difference, that's all of, that's thinking about, well, what is it we look at, and having the right work program, but it's also the how. So it's both the what and the how are really important, and really, I suppose that's quite a simplistic summation of what's quite an extensive report from Neil, where he's identified what good looks like. But I think, in simple terms, it's what the committee looks at and how it goes about its work, and both are absolutely essential. And it recognises, of course, politics will come into play in terms of preference of policy, but it shouldn't come into play in terms of it feeling like a political environment. And of course, it will always be more productive when it feels like we're all working together as a team for a genuine purpose of improvement. And of course, looking beyond Wokingham, further afield into understanding how things work elsewhere to improve the way we do things. And obviously that is a key part of this scrutiny improvement review, which is underway. Neil, do you want to say anything? I'm conscious I've stolen some of your thunder there.
I would just add to that. I think this sets out for members the sort of issues that the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny are going to be looking at. They're doing online research and they're coming to visit next Monday and Tuesday. So a number of members have been invited for interviews or focus group discussions with them. So I think this sets out the context. And for those who attended the training session last week, I think we've started a discussion, a debate now about how do we make scrutiny more effective. So this is the next step in that process. And after their visit, they will give us some recommendations from their expert view on how we can do things better and more effectively. And then the committee will then be able to determine how it takes that forward.
I'd just add to that, so when it comes, I'm invited to one of those interviews next week, and I'll have some conversations with Neil. I make an open offer again as a new chair to talk to all members of this committee to find out what they want from scrutiny. I make the same offer to the executive, and I make the same offer to Graham and the CLT as well. What do we want from scrutiny? Because if we can agree that between all three of us, then we can start to work as one team. At this moment in time, I'm not sure that we all have the same view as to what we actually want from scrutiny at the moment. So that's an open offer, and I will try to go through those meetings as we go. Adrian.
I wanted to give a concrete example of, we talk about best practice sharing, but it was in relation on the HOST committee, there was a review of maternity services for RBH, which was identified as I wouldn't say failing, but having challenges. So it was agreed between Frimley Park NHS Trust or whatever it's called and RBH that Frimley Park experts would share best practice with the colleagues in RBH. And the colleagues in RBH presented this and said that there had been a significant improvement in RBH maternity services because of the sharing of best practice knowledge from an outside body who was actually doing maternity services. So I think if we go down the route of, as mentioned by Graham, really interacting with other councils, then this is a challenging, quite hard road, and it requires a lot of effort. The amount of effort required at RBH for the interactions with Frimley has been huge because they're kind of mini CQC audits, if you like, into maternity services. So this is a challenging thing. So we need to consider how far down that kind of road we want to go.
Andrew?
This is on a different issue, if that's okay. Yeah. Were you expecting a response to? No. Okay. Thank you. Really two questions, if I may. First question, Annex A, the Executive Overview and Scrutiny Protocol, will all members be aware of this? And if not, is it something that could be emailed, to all of the members? The second completely different issue is when we are looking at this issue, I'm just wondering, in fact, I believe it's very important in order to have effective overview and scrutiny, that there is a robust process in place by which members will be made aware at an early stage of any changes in legislation that will impact on WBC, including, for example, how these might require changes in policy, delivery, performance monitoring, and so forth, and also so that we are made aware at an early stage of these legislative changes so that they can be included in the work programs.
Graham?
Yes, on the first point, I don't see any reason why Annex A couldn't be sent to all councillors. Neil, I don't see why that would be a problem, would it?
If we send it with an open invite for people to express any items that they want to be considered for the works programme, and also outlining the what we've just spoken about, how we're trying to change the behaviour and the culture behind scrutiny, then I think we send it all together. That's okay then.
Okay, great. And on the point about legislation, I agree. I think changes in legislation, the impact it has on the council, and whether we need to change policies, introduce new policies, would be really good areas of exploration for scrutiny, I would say.
Andy?
Yeah, just to support what Andrew said, and sorry, just to support what Andrew said, I think having that as a regular part of the OSMC agenda, as a regular item, like we always have a review of the future work programme, which was specifically about incoming legislation, so that we do get advance sight of it. I appreciate by the nature of incoming legislation, it's going to be speculative, but that is where I think we do need to get involved in terms of the looking ahead. And I can think of several things at the moment that perhaps members might want to examine in advance of them hitting us.
And just going back to Adrian, yes, I agree with what you said. Anyone else? Have I missed any hands up? So I think we need to note this. The actual ones. So I'll do a copy of stuff. Sure, thanks. So we're looking for a vote to say that we note this report. So all those in favour of noting the report? Thank you. Any against? Any abstentions? Now I'm getting the hang of it now. Next item is the works programme. We have 7 meetings set for this municipal year, so it's what we want to achieve in that period of time. As I said at the start of this, I would really like to get to the point where at the end of the year we can turn around and say these are the successes that we as a team, as account officers, members and this committee have actually achieved and made a difference. So we have 24 items currently on the programme. What I'm proposing to do is to try to get everybody's views on priorities and any additions to that, and to review the works programme in preparation for July. Any comments? Andrew?
Yes, thank you. I think the work programme must take into account the possibility that there'll be a climate emergency overview and scrutiny committee. Some of the items to be allocated from that list would sit with a climate emergency overview and scrutiny committee. I would also like to suggest that recommendation that the scrutiny member training proceed as outlined on page 71 and be open to all members, and that additional training opportunities be sought. Again, this is additions to the list on page 71, that additional training opportunities be sought for scrutiny of climate emergency and scrutiny of equalities and inclusion.
So as a proposal that, do you want to just word that again for us? That
I think there are 2 parts or 2 separate proposals here. The first is that the scrutiny member training proceed as outlined on page, well, no, it's actually one proposal, isn't it? No, it's probably 2. Proceed as outlined on page 71 and be open to all members. So that's the first proposal.
Let's take that one first then. Is there a seconder for that?
In my experience, scrutiny training has always been made available to every member because it's so important. So I don't think you need a motion to do that. It does say 4 members. It doesn't say 4 scrutiny members, and I presumed it would be as usual for all members.
I thought last week's Alison was open to everyone.
Okay, I'm happy to delete the last bit. So just proceed as outlined on page 71.
Okay, thank you. Is there a seconder for that? Yeah. All those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions? Right. Second proposal.
Okay, so the second proposal is additional training opportunities be sought for, and perhaps we need to vote on each of these separately, I don't know. Scrutiny of climate emergency and scrutiny of equalities and inclusion.
Do we know if such training exists? Sorry.
Sorry, could I ask a question about the budget that's available for training and whether there's capacity to put on extra sessions?
Good question.
The answer is I believe that there is budget available to do additional training sessions, but I can confirm the detail after the meeting.
I would have hoped that we'd have got the very best training for the budget we had available. So I'm quite surprised to hear there's a considerable percentage still left.
Well, the member training budget covers more than scrutiny, so I think it's about understanding what other demands there are on the budget and what priority this has.
So is it a matter of we're getting in first?
Always a good idea.
Right. So, Andrew, your first one was, Neil, do you want to read them back?
2 additional sessions, 1 on climate emergency, 1 on equalities and inclusion.
Is there a seconder for that proposal? Vote. All those in favour? Against? Any abstentions? Carried. Okay. You'll report back on next meeting. Any other comments on the works programme? Andrew?
Thanks. It's just one thing, and that goes back, I think, to this idea of making a difference. Our next meeting has scrutiny of the Climate Emergency Action Plan, and nothing we say or do in that meeting is going to change the contents of that plan. And this has happened every year that we've had the CEP, that it comes to scrutiny far, far too late for us to make a difference to the contents of it. And it's exactly the same report that we see goes to council. So why are we wasting our time looking at it in scrutiny? Why don't we use that time to look at something we can make a difference on? I appreciate the work programme was set earlier in the year, but it's just a comment that there is no point in scrutinising something 2 weeks before council. It's too late.
Without trying to defend the officers, I think there probably still is some time because it will still be in draft form. There will be time for changes, and we have had the 2 task and finish groups over the past couple of years, which have made many detailed recommendations.
I appreciate the task and finish groups have tried to make a difference and probably have made a difference on the edges, but in terms of us as a committee reviewing the full report, I don't think that's ever made a difference in the past.
Perhaps the KPIs for the Climate Emergency Action Plan should be included in the quarterly performance reports. I had understood that was going to happen following the last task and finish group. It was just a matter of SLT agreeing what the KPIs were, and then it was going to, become part of the detailed performance report, that we all look at. Is Graham still there? Oh no, he's gone home.
That's a question we'll ask Graham.
Yes, we can ask Graham, but I think if there is a proposal to set up a new climate emergency scrutiny committee, and that committee can then start to get into this process, I think, in terms of when information comes to that committee and what it does with it.
Yeah, I think I'm also seeing this. The point I'm making is also the broader point about making sure that we get things that we can make a difference on. We don't get things just to look through them and say, that's nice. It's that broader point which is as important.
I totally agree. And that's what we should attempt to do. All right, so the next item is the committee work programmes, which is on page 75. Starts on page 75. And as Andy's quite rightly putting out, the first one, we shall review. Right, Steve.
If I could just make a comment here. So you asked earlier on about the hot topics, if you like, in relation to each of the departments. And I've mentioned homelessness presentation, which is really important for obvious reasons. The other two are the refugee situation at the moment in the Borough, and just not the Ukrainian refugee situation, but also, you know, we've got Afghan refugees, we've got asylum seekers, and there are some real challenges within that, particularly in relation to this government-led, it's a Home Office scheme, for example, certainly with the asylum seeker situation, and there's risks there in relation to demand going forward, sustainability of actually what that looks like. So that's something that I think is something we have to keep a very close eye on and work very closely in, you know, school places, as you say, and all these sorts of things, and housing and demands going forward. So that's important. And the third one, just to bring to your attention, is the sustainability of the bus services in the borough, which is really important. So there's ongoing conversation. So bus patronage post-COVID has not recovered in many parts of the borough, and those bus routes are under significant threat of not being financially sustainable. Now, that's just not about buses, it's about some fare-paying children get to school, people deal with isolation issues, people accessing hospitals, and all these sorts of things. So it has a real big impact if some of those bus routes start falling away. So there's lots of work going on the bus service improvement plan that's in there. And Rebecca Brooks, who leads on all that, is absolutely fantastic. She's a knowledge that I've never seen before in relation to what she knows about the bus services. And so I think you'd probably find there's a lot of value within that. But it is an immediate issue that's happening here and now. So those are the three immediate hot topics, if you like, in relation to place and growth. Thank you, Jim.
Alice, first.
Yeah, I'm very surprised to see that the leader and chief executive are not coming before this committee until September to discuss the council's priorities for the year ahead. I mean, in September, that's May, June, July, August. That's a third of the year gone. I'd normally expect the chief executive and the leader to attend this first meeting in June to tell us the priorities for the year, to inform our work programme, so we know what policies and what strategies, what's coming forwards, so we can decide what we want to scrutinise and add value.
Andrew?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I agree with Alison, and I wonder whether we might wish to consider, requesting that the meeting with the leader and the chief executive be brought forward to the 7th of July meeting for the reasons that Alison has given and others. Yeah, I found also, Steve, your outline of three of the very, very pressing priority areas: homelessness, refugees, and the sustainability, of bus services. Very helpful indeed. I'm wondering whether we might wish to ask Steve if he could suggest possible timings, for introducing each of those items into the work programme, timings that will be feasible, from an officer's point of view, but also recognise the urgency of those matters. Thank you.
Thank you. So, I mean, we've got lots of data around homelessness, but it's a moving picture at the moment. So, and we're also, of course, from a management action plan perspective, there's lots of mitigation that's going on in there. It's very difficult to deal with demand, but you can do something about unit cost. And so the focus is moving and shifting certain areas. You don't want people in temporary accommodation, for example, it's most expensive. You want people in private rented sector and so on and so on. Again, not getting into detail, but that's really what so what are you doing about it, Steve, sort of conversation. So I'd suggest probably to get something meaningful and seeing how the emerging picture in housing, I'd probably say September. I'd probably also say the same for the other two, because obviously we've still got a number of refugees coming in at the moment. The hosting scheme is still happening, it's moving and it's increasing as we move forward. So again, an update there, probably September again, I think, because to give you a report today, I think probably won't give you the value you need as a scrutiny committee. And there are plans afoot to address with some of the immediate concerns around some of the bus routes now. And the next pinch point is probably turning up later on in the year. So for those of you who don't know, DFT, Department for Transport, have been funding quite a lot of the bus routes, or giving payments to local authorities because of the changes in COVID. That funding stops in October, definitely, this year. So that's the killer date, if you like, in relation to us putting in place a remodelled opportunity to what we do. So I think the September meeting there, and once Rebecca's had a chance to pull together the any rerouting proposals, any mitigations we can put in place, you'll have something meaningful in front of you in September. So I think, I mean, that makes September quite heavy, but I think July would be too early.
Just to clarify, as the report touches upon, the Community and Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee have put in some requests of items they would like to consider. And I think buses is one of those, and homelessness is another one. So I think we just need to have a conversation outside this meeting about how the two committees dovetail, and we're not duplicating, and we're getting a smooth process. So we can do that. If Peter wants to, is happy with that?
Yeah, I was just going to make that exact point, because we've got on the agenda July 7th buses for this committee, then on July 4th buses for the overview for the corporate community one. So clearly we don't want to duplicate that.
Norman?
Same point with corporate and community. We've got bus strategy 4th of July, and we've got homelessness scheduled in for 3rd of October. So we'll make sure one committee does it.
So we'll make that request, Alison, and as Andrew said, see if we can get them to come to the July meeting. Yeah, the leader and the chief exec. Any other comments on as we go through these? Sorry, Peter.
So, sorry, just reiterating the point of the duplication of the bus strategy. So we've got that down as the two meetings on the 4th of July and the 7th of July. Do we defer the 7th of July one, drop that from this particular meeting and go for the community one, bearing in mind Steve's comment about September? So I know we talked about it in the community one, July would be okay. Does that still fit with you?
Yeah, in particular, it's a bus service improvement plan that I think is going up for an update, and there's a timing issue there. So that has to go to DFT. I think that's probably in the summer. I think so. There's a timing issue there. My point was really around more around the whole bus network and sustainability, how that's working. But I do agree with the point, because this did happen quite a lot last year, where topics were going to a committee and then into here and it was getting scrutinised twice. So I do think that discipline around, well, like for yourself as chair of that committee, Peter, whether you want to bring an update back here to those things, because it's the management committee, rather than just rerunning the whole thing again, because, you know, quite rightly, members will want to get into the detail of a particular topic. So So my preference would be obviously to put it into the relevant committee and have it heard there. And if there's anything that needs to be escalated to management committee or whatever, that's absolutely fine. But I mean, it's your call, obviously.
Callum?
Just to update members that towards the end of last week, I had emails from highways officers that suggested that the September community and corporate meeting would be the best time to review the sort of the issue of buses as a whole. So that would hopefully avoid the duplication with this committee, and then an update could possibly be brought back here by yourself.
Yeah, given the fact that we're looking to invite the chief exec and the leader to the 7th of July, I think if we can stop the duplication of the bus issue, then I think we have some space within that meeting on the 7th. Is that as a proposal? Is everyone in agreement with that? Lots of nods, that'll do. Thank you. Executive forward report.
Sorry, Jim, I had my hand.
Sorry, I'm getting the hang of it. Slowly.
Okay, so looking at the work programme, we've got a lot of things to try and put into our calendar. We haven't quite done that yet. I mean, in September, we've only got leader and chief exec, which we're hoping to bring back to July, and the quarterly report. What other matters are we going to look at? One of the things in our work programme, and we've got 24 things on there. Number 7 is looking at the tree strategy and biodiversity action plan update and the progress of the task and finish group's recommendations. As we all know, in the minutes of the last meeting of OS management, we agreed the recommendations. When are they going to executive? Because I couldn't see that in the executive forward programme. And obviously the timing of that is going to impact when, Chairman, you want to put that into our work programme.
I believe officers are trying to get it onto the July executive agenda. And the report's going to go to council in July on the council motion, which was included within the task and finish group's report.
So I presume we would want to give that 6 months at least before we're looking at that. So not looking at it until February.
That sounds about right. In terms of the long list of 24 items, I think the chairman's suggestion was that for the next meeting we come back with an attempt to sort of break that down into priorities in consultation with yourselves between now and the next meeting. So we've got some sort of firmer list.
Yeah, just whether it's always quite difficult to book in other people coming to speak to the meeting.
Andrew?
Yeah, just a point of clarification, though. Have we agreed to include homelessness and refugees in the September meeting?
I think we said that homelessness was being requested at the community one. The refugee situation, no. So I think that's something you might want to, and it is on the list here actually. It is on the 24 that's there, so it's something you might want to discuss in September from the timing perspective, get an update on where we are.
Again, input from all members and officers on the priorities of these, so we can try to get there as soon as possible. Try to get these things into the plan as soon as possible. Whether we can get anything else into July, I think is probably pushing it a little bit, unless anybody's got a real priority that actually needs to be done.
I think if we can get the leader and the chief executive along, that's a good half an hour item if they're going to run through all their priorities across the whole council, and we're going to be able to ask questions.
Okay. Are there any further comments on page 75? I'm sorry, Pete. Yeah. I will get the hands up.
Sorry, I just wanted some clarity on what you're expecting us to do. Are we supposed to send in an email to whoever with our favourite list?
Just send me an email, and then it's me and Neil, and we'll try to collate and prioritise as best we can. But as I say, some of those items will be subject to change as we go through.
Okay. And with regards to the work programmes that the committees have requested, so I know the the community one have requested some items. Are we going to be allocated those items?
Yes. Yes. If everyone's happy. As long as everyone's happy with them, yeah.
I'm getting nods. So I guess so, yes. So we will get confirmed the local plan update, the bus information strategy, and there's a third one, which is the LC whip.
So if the committee is happy to do that, there's obviously plenty of other items on this committee's list. So it's just a matter for the committee to agree. Those three items are listed on page 70, at the bottom of page 70.
Do I make a proposal?
Yeah. Proposal, please.
Okay, I'll make a proposal that the corporate and community overview scrutiny committee take on those items documented on page 70.
Seconded. Oh, you seconded. Well, thank you. Seconded. Thanks. All those in favour? All those against? Abstentions? I've got a couple of comments. Pete, we'll go for you. Sorry.
Sorry again. Do we have a deadline when you want our comments?
I'll email it. Yeah, we'll email out a request and with timescales after this meeting.
Thank you.
Andrew?
And in a similar vein to the vote that we just had a moment ago, given that it's likely that there will be a climate emergency overview and scrutiny committee, I'm just wondering whether we might be able to identify one or two items from this list of 24 that might be allocated to that overview and scrutiny committee. For instance, number 7, relating to the biodiversity action plan. Number 16, air quality improvement targets. And there may be others.
Yeah. Yeah, the answer to that is we'll go through those once we get everyone's feedback. Andy?
Thank you. Mine is a question for Steve, really, just relating to the refugee issue. When you or your officers bring that report, will it also include, for example, the people at the Moat House in Monash? And I know technically as British passport holders, they're not refugees, but they have some shared characteristics in terms of the Hong Kong Chinese arrivals. Will it include those guys as well?
Yes, Andy, because what's important is, and I know the focus is on the Ukrainian situation at the moment and the tragedy that's going on over there, but we do need to look at all asylum situation and the whole refugee situation, because there are complexities within each of the cohorts in relation to number one, support and differentials there, and there's things like social cohesion issues, and also move on accommodation and these sorts of strategies that the Home Office lead on, of which at the moment we're liaising with regularly, like South East Migration Service, but we're yet to have to see a clear plan of where that sort of sustainable sort of move on strategy, for example, is going to land. And that's the concern at the moment, is at what point does that become BAU, the situation which is not sustainable, or is there a wider national plan on how this is going to be addressed? But we need to look at totality of the whole refugee situation. So yes, absolutely.
Andrew?
Yes, and on this same issue, I'm just wondering whether members might consider that there would be anything of value in calling a very small number of witnesses on this issue. So, for instance, my understanding is that Care for Calais are involved with the accommodation at the Moat House Hotel. I understand also that the Reading Refugee Support Group is very actively engaged, and I'm just wondering whether this might be an instance, in which being able to engage with a small, very small number, of other stakeholders in this could be productive.
Absolutely. I mean, the way that we're addressing the situation and trying to rise to the challenge is working with our partners. The local authority can't do this on its own. So we work very closely with the voluntary sector and other organisations in relation to the support that's happening in the wider community in relation to the situation we have now. Absolutely. And there's probably more intelligence within some of our partners than there is with us, actually, in relation to what's going on out there, actually. So be fully supportive of that. Yeah.
Any other comments on the forward plans at the moment? No? Just leaves us with the last item then, which is the the executive forward plan, including that. No comments? It is then the action tracker.
This is just the regular report where we'll list all the agreed actions from each meeting during the year and a quick update on what's been progressed and what's still outstanding, so members are clear on where we stand.
Andrew?
Yes, thank you, Neil, for this. And I think the concept of an action tracker is really, really valuable. And it's something which I would hope that all of the overview and scrutiny committees would consider. However, I am wondering whether without making it overly complex and time consuming, I am wondering whether it might be possible to redesign this tracker to enable individual actions to be tracked over or for as long as is appropriate. The action tracker here as it stands is an update from the previous meeting only, okay? And I'm just wondering, whether there might be some simple way, okay, of tracking these actions over the appropriate period of time, which is going to vary, of course, considerably, from action to action. It might also, be useful, become a useful sort of archival record as well. So the extant activities, the ones which are happening at the moment, and also those which have happened, in the past, so that we can perhaps look back, and see what the experience, has been with some of these, the history of some of these actions and so forth in the past. But I do stress not wanting to create, a huge task here. But I do applaud, the idea, the concept of an action tracker.
The answer is yes. Neil and I will see what we can concoct to make something like that happen. So that leaves us with any other business? Anyone? And just from me, thank you very much for your patience with my lack of noticing hands up. It's a skill that Neil tells me comes with practice. So we'll see if we can get some practice in. Thank you very much, everyone.